Hey everyone, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the Ryzen 7700X and the Ryzen 7950X. So what AMD have done is they've sent two processors to each of the media, and they've kind of staggered which ones we get. But then today, the day of launch, I'll get the other two sent to me as well, so I'll have the other two in the pack, hopefully reviewed for you later on in the week. So I've got kind of the big hitter 16 core, and then I've also got the kind of middle of the range 8 core. Now today we are going to be going over, because there's a lot of testing been done with obviously a new platform. AMD have now moved on to LGA, and if you haven't seen it, what that means is a funky new CPU. You'd have to have lived on a planet not to have known about this. But there are now no pins on the back of the board at all because they're on the motherboard. I don't really like saying it, but LGA is the way Intel has their CPUs in the socket. And you've got all those little pins, and remember the bent pin? Well, not going to have them on the back of the processor anymore. Now I have to admit, the IHS, which is the heatsink on the top of the CPU itself, is rather large. There is a lot of metal there on top. So I don't know whether we are going to see a resurgence of things from like DeBauer, either delidding these or giving us a tool that we can do it ourselves, or whether we're going to end up lapping these to try and make this a little bit thinner to try and improve temperatures. Because one of the things I did notice straight away was, and if you are wondering, you're wondering why I'm not going into exactly what's going on with the processors. Well, everyone's going to cover the same stuff, but we aren't all going to cover our own tests. So if you want to go and learn about the processors and exactly what's going on, and the fact that this one's 170 watt and this one's 65 watt, no, actually I apologise, this one's 110 watt, then that's probably about as deep as I'm going to go into that, because everyone's going to say the same stuff because there's only 4 processors out there. But there's only one lot of my testing. So that's why I'm going to concentrate on this. Now, temperatures, I did notice straight away were very, very warm. Now, I am testing on an all-new test rig. We have a new motherboard. So I said to the guys at Be Quiet, I wanted a case that I could both have nice and quiet for normal use, because there's a lot of times when I'm running tests in the background and they take forever. But then I also wanted to be able to turn things to 11 so that I could go for overclocks. So I've gone with the 802 mid tower, but with their 360mm silent loop, I've changed all of the fans in the case for the new Pro fans, which means the fans on the AIO can go up to 3000 RPM. So that does mean when it gets to overclock lunacy, can bang those fans up to blowing a small hurricane. Means I can keep my temperatures down. I have double checked with another AIO as well to make sure that we weren't having AIO issues with some of these tests. And I did double check that with a rather large H170, just so that you are aware. I did cover bases to make sure that we weren't having any problems. But they were very warm. So with the 7700X, which was the first one that I tested, I was amazed because it was 85 degrees plus. I saw in the 90s. So straight away I contacted AMD, and they did say that up to 95 degrees is expected, which I was kind of surprised by. In that, what the processor is doing at stock is it's just gobbling volts and it's gobbling power to try and boost itself to the absolute possible limits. And 95 degrees is seen at its operating temperature, that it will not degrade and have any issues with. It can run at 95 degrees 24/7. Now, based on the way that we've done reviews in the past, I mean, personally, if I was doing a CPU cooler review, the way that we used to do it was if it went over 80 degrees, we'd say the cooler had failed that test. Admittedly, we manually fix clocks and stuff, so we wouldn't have had all that moving around. But 95 degrees is going to be something that a lot of us are going to have problems with. So you're either going to say, no, it runs too hot, or you're just going to go, well, nah, AMD says it's all right. So I think it's all right. Now, in that, they run very warm. If you're getting lower than those temperatures, which I was able to do if I turned the fans up, and I think at that point, you kind of, rather than finding the limits of the cooling, which is definitely what the processors are looking to do, at that point, you're finding the limits of how much these can gobble, and they get to the point where they can't really take any more power or clock themselves anymore, and then you'll see slightly lower temperatures than 95 degrees. And I'm kind of happy that I did manage to get these in the 80s for the most part. But weirdly, which is something I'll talk to you about in a minute, with eco mode, the processors can take on a completely different identity with a couple of changes in the BIOS, and then they use much less power and basically are horrifically cooler as well. But, so temperatures were very warm, and in comparison with that, the power usage was more than I was expecting in that we thought that with the refinements and the we all thought they were going to use a lot less power. You know, new processor, new manufacturing, all of that sort of stuff. And then it's like, well, the 7700X was using the same amount of power as the 5900X was last time. And the 5900X had more cores, it was kind of perplexing. But in their defense, as you can see in the graph, even the 7950X wasn't using the same amount of power as a 12900K. So they use more than we maybe possibly were expecting, but it's still definitely using less power than the competition. And as you will see in a minute, they've obviously done some magical things because the performance is on point. Now, eco mode, because I don't want to start showing you too many performance graphs until I start talking to you about the overclocking and then the eco mode as well. So eco mode, this is 110 watts. Effectively, you can go into Precision Boost Overdrive. You've got the PPT, there's 3 settings in Precision Boost Overdrive anyway, and you can go in there and you can basically tell this one at 65 watt, or you can go in and say that this one, which is 170 watt, is actually just 110 watt. But the weird thing is when you do that, you get a lot cooler temperatures and a lot less power usage, but it doesn't actually, in the end, perform that much worse. It very much is a Jekyll and Hyde. So it's almost like you have the calm child in eco mode, and then you literally have the hyperactive kind of running like a lunatic, getting absolutely like done when you de-restrict it. And I think the kind of de-restricting side of it here is going to be, for the most part, very much about graphs and shouting loud about performance and all of that sort of stuff, when in reality, it's almost the eco mode that makes more sense long term, especially when you see the cooling requirements for the eco mode are significantly less. It's going to be quieter, easier to live with. There's so much more going on about it, but effectively, AMD have said that they want to make it easier to be able to flick between the BIOS. I'm going to come out right now and say we need like a switch on the taskbar or something to literally be able to go between eco mode, the normal mode, which I have to admit, as you'll see again in a minute, I'm not really a fan of the normal completely unrestricted mode, if I'm completely honest, and maybe Precision Boost Overdrive for like the offset, like a manual set Precision Boost Overdrive, or even a manual overclock. I think we just need a that we can flick on the fly to switch between them. Asus do have something in the BIOS where you can sit in there and set it up, but as you'll see when I talk about overclocking in a minute, and this one, I do think the Asus BIOS needs more work just going forward. Anyway, so yes, overclock wise, this now they both boost very well. They're both going to be on, and because you obviously have an all-core boost, and then it will go higher depending on how many cores you're using. And they were both above 5.2 gigahertz all-core when fully loaded. The 7950X was more inclined to boost more with lower core usage. In fact, I saw 5.85 gigahertz with the big 16 gigahertz on a lower threaded applications. And this one was kind of popping in about the 5.5 mark. Now, for a manual overclock, so this was 5.55 doing what it wanted to. With this, I managed to get all-core overclock at 5.5 gigahertz at 1.25 volts. And the temperatures were there or thereabout what I was getting at stock, which I was kind of happy with, in the fact that rather than it running at 5.2 gigahertz, it was then suddenly running at 5.5 gigahertz, and it was all core and fixed, and it responded really well. With the 7950, manual overclocking that was a nightmare because I kept getting overcurrent shutdowns with the Asus. Now, normally when you get an overcurrent shutdown, you know it's overcurrent because it doesn't blue screen, it doesn't freeze. It literally, as soon as the load hits, it turns off like someone has switched the power supply off. It just literally goes black screen and off. You have to then manually turn it back on to get it to kick back in. That is overcurrent. This was doing it all the time. Like genuinely, as soon as I started playing with anything. Now, normally at that point, you go into the settings and you release the taps for the power current. There's one in the Digi section where you can go in there and literally go from 100% up to 140%. That didn't make any difference. You could go in and open the taps within Precision Boost Overdrive and try and go about it that way. That wasn't doing anything. I just kept getting hard shutdowns. Now, I've dealt with some very power hungry processors and stuff in the past, but there didn't seem to be a way that I could effectively get this to give that enough power without tripping itself out. To the point where in the end I had to go with a mix of Asus. There's a setting in the BIOS where you can tell the core speed to go into an AI mode, and then I used a 200 megahertz offset within Precision Boost Overdrive. And even then, when I was opening the taps, you could literally, it just wasn't happy. So I do think that Asus need to make a few tweaks with this BIOS to allow us to get more power out of the board. Because at the end of the day, I'm using the Hero, which was the board that I got sent by AMD. I was running the BIOS that AMD wanted me to run as well. And I do think, genuinely, this processor, overclocking wise, has so much more to give. And at the end of the day, on the day, the problem was just I couldn't give the processor enough power to get it stable. And I also couldn't give the processor enough power to get the board to stay on effectively. I couldn't actually get 5.2 gigahertz across all of the cores stable manually. But when it was doing it of its own devices, it was quite happy. Now, I tried a range of voltages with this. Literally, so I tried with the 1.25 that we started with here. I went right the way up to 1.4, and then I also came back and then went back again in case I was putting too many volts through it. There was effectively 2 wasted days working on this, trying to get a decent overclocking play, and then I ended up using this mishmash, which did make a difference. But I know 100% once I can get more power into it, that I'll be able to get that all-core clock up. And I do genuinely think this has so much more to give. Even if I managed to get it at 5.5, the scores would be unbelievable. But we'll just have to see where the limits of the cooling are with this one. I think this might be like a dedicated water cooling loop and hanging it out the window or putting it in the freezer just to try and keep temps down so that we can go absolutely nuts with it. And I'm all for that. And this processor is definitely going to be one I'm going to be trying on other boards, maybe even other boards from, well, definitely from other brands, because definitely from other brands. And we'll see how things progress. I do just think this is early niggles, though. So power draw was, as I've shown you, a little bit higher than we may expected, but definitely even still less than the 12900KS. Cinebench R23, this was something that AMD were like, make sure you run that, make sure you run that. They were hounding me to give them the scores to make sure everything was kind of where they were expecting it, because there have been issues with the BIOS and stuff, and I was actually slightly in front of where they were expecting, and then obviously I made the tweaks. But here is the first time that you can really see the eco mode coming in and having an effect. And you'll see that the single-threaded stuff, because we sort this graph into two different ones, the single-threaded stuff, it didn't really impact single-thread too much badly at all. Yes, it had an impact on the multi-threaded, but as you can see, yeah, okay, it's a bit of a drop down, but I'm just going to show you the temps now that we've seen this. The difference with temperatures was unreal. Like, it was so much easier to cool. You could literally, like, you wouldn't, on Eco, you wouldn't need a 360mm. You could probably get have a nice 240 on it. You could have a Noctua NHD15 on there comfortably with it quietly as well. It would just be so much easier to live with both processors. But even this one, I mean, crikey, that one can get properly hot. I was amazed how much the 8-core got hot. So Cinebench, you can see it was very healthy. And then Blender was an eye-opener. Now, we have our own custom Blender. With the 4K result, which you can see there, which is the top of the graph, basically. That is an awfully long test. You can see that some processors, like the 5600X, takes 35 minutes to do that Blender run. It's not a quick 5-minute run. We've done it this way. It's got like 4 million polygons in it. It's basically the OC3D logo with loads of reflections and loads of layers, and it's mental. And it is a properly stressful test because of the length, and it just runs nuts for the entire time. It maxes the system out. So for us to be able to get this chucking out 8-minute scores, and even the 7700 was doing incredibly well when you think about it. It's they're mixing around the sort of power of the 5900X, and the Eco's not even that bad when you look at it. So, oh sorry, that was a 5900X overclock it had beated. It's actually faster than the 5900X. It's very, very strong. Guardians of the Galaxy and Total War 3 were very, very good and strong tests. Again, new processor, drivers will definitely get better. But then Watch Dogs and Cyberpunk were not so good. Very much on those minimums. If you have a look, they weren't that great. We have gone back and checked these results again and again. We even went and checked some of the old CPUs a couple of times just to make sure that everything was kind of in sync, because obviously when you're going from one rig to another rig, there's possible things that could have gone wrong. But with this, as I said, it may be something that gets fixed with a BIOS. It may be something that gets fixed with a driver update. I don't think they are going to be the results moving forward, though. That's definitely something they will fix. Now, I've waffled on an awful lot. I could show you because I took so much B-roll footage for this in the end. But the problem was I took loads of B-roll footage for this, and then when I got to this and the overclocking, and it took 2 days, I literally ran out of time to then go back and start doing all the B-roll footage again. You wouldn't believe the time of day that I'm filming this now to try and get this out to you. So, my overall experience with these two processors have been that the 7950X is an absolute powerhouse. That I personally, and this comes in at 739 by the way, and I genuinely don't think I've got the best from this yet, and I wholeheartedly do believe there's a fix coming for the motherboard so that I can get the best from this. I'm hoping that it's not that if I want to overclock this, I'm going to need the Extreme or the Formula or a bigger board. But we don't know yet. It's early days. We will find out. The 7700X, I was amazed that it could be that hot and pulling that much power for a baby 8-core. But as you'll see, it's kind of around the power usage of a 5900X, and it's also kind of around the performance of a 5900X, both single-threaded and multi-core as well. So I think that if you think about the step down, I think they've actually done quite well with that, in the fact that it's got less cores, but it's still popping out the same sort of power from the model up from the previous gen. So I think they've done very, very well with both. Temperatures, definitely scary. Like, I wanted to bolt air coolers to these, but unless you've got that eco mode on, I don't think you can. If eco mode is going to be something that they're going to be suggesting for a lot of people, they do need to have a very, very simple way of enabling it. Now, that's not in Ryzen Master yet. It needs to be. I also think it needs to be even easier than that, because you have to wait for Ryzen Master to start up every time. I think you need a switch somewhere which is just on into the BIOS, and hopefully they can live switch on the fly so you don't have to do restarts. I do think that would then make that eco mode side of things much more attainable and usable, and then viable for a normal user at home to be able to flick between the two. Because at the end of the day, unless you are doing multi-core benching and all that sort of stuff, with the gaming, there wasn't a massive amount of difference between eco and then kind of nuts. So unless you are doing video editing or like Blender renders or photo editing and stuff, I don't really see where you're going to need that multi-core performance anyway. And I do think there are better ways to be able to get that multi-core performance without leaving it as stock, because that's the thing with these, both of these, I'm not happy with the way that they run at stock, because they do use too much power and the performance isn't there to back it up, and you can get better performance with the same amount of power when you manually do things. Definitely lots of work for me to do over the next few weeks. I know I have a lot of motherboards coming, so motherboard reviews will be coming too. But the one thing I will say is I'm going to review the other two processors first before then I move on to the board, so that I've got more of a foundation with what's going to be required from them, and then work out which processor I will use with the boards, because obviously can't test every board with every processor. It would just be crazy. Deep breaths. Congratulations if you got to the end. You do get an internet cookie, and you can tell me underneath. Please like, subscribe and comment. Yes, it has been a lot of chatting, but at the end of the day, with a processor, it's all about testing, it's all about results, and it is more than me just showing you a screen with some gameplay on. So I've tried to make this very much about my real world usage with it, the problems that I've had, try and discuss it with you like mates at a pub, because that's my angle with this sort of stuff. And let you decide whether you want to be investing in a whole new platform, because that's something you do need to remember. DDR5 memory, new motherboards, probably going to need better cooling as well, if my experience with these two is anything to go by, unless you're kind of interested in that eco mode. But I don't see why you should buy a processor and then have to underclock it for you to be able to use it. So $419 for the 7700X. I think that's an okay price for it. Yes, it's got very high clocks and decent performance, but it's not going to make me go out and invest in a new platform personally. The 7950X, loads of grunt, amazing. But that again is with the issue that I had with the overcurrent protection on the Asus board. That's also making me quite nervous, because if I need more than the Hero to run a 730 pound processor, you know, within at its limits, I'm wondering what Asus are up to. So there's lots of things here that I'm both very happy about, but there's other things that I'm kind of concerned about. So I'm very interested to see how BIOS is going to change throughout the next few weeks, because I think we're going to have stability fixes, I think we're going to have temperature fixes. I think there's going to be a lot happening very thick and fast with this over the next couple of months, and it's definitely going to be something for all of us to stay tuned in and me stay on top of, so that I can keep you up to date with what's going on. But it's very exciting times. AMD have made great waves, definitely got the clocks that we've always wanted, performance that we've always wanted. We just need to try and sort out the stability issues and the boards at the moment not being able to give us the power so that we can go nuts with overclocking that one, because that's definitely got loads more to give and it's annoying me. Did you get that? Anyway, thank you very much for tuning in. Please like, subscribe and comment, share to your friends. Let your dog and cat watch it if they're really that bored. But thank you very much. This has been The Tiniest One with another video for you. Out. Love you, sis.